Hello everybody! Today's lesson is going to be over rhetorical situation. So to start, I'll give you a little bit of background information. Don't worry about this too much, it's just to kind of introduce you to the topic. Rhetorical situation is a concept introduced by Lloyd Bitzer in 1968. As we go through this, you will see that it is a relatively straightforward concept, and it is a bit surprising that no one had introduced it before 1968. Before we get into the technical terminology, let's start with a real-life example. Okay, imagine you're at a dinner party. So you're speaking to one of the party guests, you're having a good time, and then that person expresses a dislike for your favorite musician. In my case, it'd be Taylor Swift. So you're just shocked to hear this. You can't believe anybody would dislike Taylor Swift. So because of this, you're going to spend the rest of the night trying to convince this person. We're going to call this person Steve because we're just going to keep coming back to this example. So you spend the whole night trying to convince Steve to change his mind and give her music another chance. Does this scenario sound at least remotely familiar? Have you ever experienced something similar to this? This would be an example of rhetorical situation. Okay, so rhetorical situation isn't just this casual discourse illustrated in that example. Rhetorical situation can literally be everywhere. Another good example would be a politician running for office. So TV interviews, flyers, commercials, all of those would be rhetorical situations. They're all trying to achieve that one goal, convince people to vote for that politician. Another example would be advertisements. Think about it. When you're watching your favorite TV channel and all those ads just seem to be targeted to that one specific audience. Another more modern iteration of this would be, ads online. And they're all based on your cookies or your browser history. Also, trying to get promoted at your job. Your actions at work when trying to convince your boss that you deserve a job promotion. All of these things, they count as rhetorical situation. Can you see the similar underlying current flowing through all of these things? It's persuasion. You're trying to persuade somebody to do something. Okay, now let's get into the technical aspects. According to Bitzer's essay, where he introduces the idea of rhetorical situation is, quote, a complex of persons, events, objects, and relations presenting an actual or potential exigence, which can be completely or partially removed if discourse introduced into the situation can so constrain human decision or action as to bring about the significant modifications of the exigence. Whew! So yeah, that was a mouthful. I'm not even going to put that definition on this slide because honestly, when I first read it, it went over my head too. Instead, I'm going to give it to you in easier to digest terms. Rhetorical situation is where a problem or issue arises and the rhetor, so the person who's trying to convince the other people of a certain idea, has the ability to communicate with a target audience, and that target audience has the capability to cause change. Essentially, rhetorical discourse needs a proper situation to occur. Another definition that would probably be good to introduce at this point is rhetoric. So this whole time you've probably been wondering, what even is rhetoric? What is rhetorical discourse? What are we even talking about? Why am I taking this class? Calm down, don't worry. I'm going to get you to where you need to go, and it'll all make sense. So, rhetoric is the art of persuasion. Traditionally, it is in regard to speaking, but rhetoric can be applied to any form of communication. So again, going back to those examples that we talked about in the previous slide, it can be anything from flyers, TV commercials, art. As long as the aim is to persuade the audience to do something, it counts as rhetoric. So, now that we understand what rhetoric is, it can be a little bit easier to deduce what rhetorical discourse is. If discourse is conversation or discussion, rhetorical discourse would therefore be discourse or discussion that aims to persuade. So it makes a little more sense now, right? With rhetorical situation, there are three key aspects or elements to keep in mind. These three elements are present in every single rhetorical situation, and being able to identify them will come in handy when we get into rhetorical analysis. The first and most important aspect is exigence. Exigence is an urgent need or demand. Exigence is going to be our issue at hand. As you've probably deduced, there needs to be a problem to fix in order to have a rhetorical situation. Referring back to our example, at the dinner party, Steve not liking Taylor Swift, that was our exigence. That was the issue that we knew we just had to solve right then and there. So for another example, consider the suffragettes. Their exigence was fighting for the right to vote. One thing to keep in mind is that the exigence must be something that can be changed and hasn't already been changed or is just impossible. It wouldn't really be a rhetorical situation if my exigence was women's suffrage in America in 2018. It's already been accomplished, so it doesn't count as exigence. Or, for example, something impossible would be feeling like we need to replace all the water in the world with Gatorade. That might be your exigence, but is it really possible to change? Our next aspect that is almost equally important to our rhetorical situation is audience. Audience is the people or peoples that your argument is aimed at. Referring back to our dinner party scenario, our audience would be Steve, the dinner party guest that dislikes Taylor Swift. Keep in mind, other than your primary audience, your argument may also come in contact with secondary or even tertiary audiences. At the dinner party, that might be other guests that overhear your conversation. The main thing to keep in mind with audience is that the primary audience must be able to mediate change or be changed in order to constitute the situation as rhetorical. If Steve hates Taylor Swift's music but gets in an accident where he loses his hearing, then he can no longer be considered your audience for the rhetorical situation at hand. You can't change his mind to listen to Taylor Swift because he can't hear anything. Going back to another example we used, consider the political campaign. If you're running for office and you run an ad that targets children, then that's a failed rhetorical situation because children just can't vote. Lastly, when constructing a rhetorical situation, one must consider the constraints. Constraints are the things that get in the way of a message getting to the target audience, therefore prohibiting that audience from mediating change. Constraints can be anything from language barriers, so let's say I'm trying to convince someone of something but we don't speak the same language. Technology issues, so let's say maybe I'm trying to make a website about climate change but I did the HTML code wrong and the page won't load. Or maybe I got hacked and someone said put stuff that says like climate change isn't real. Or maybe something even as simple as I don't know how to use a computer. Or maybe my target audience doesn't know how to use a computer and so they're not going to see my message. Any of those count as constraints. Constraints can be even something as simple as a disinterested or resistant audience. They just don't care. They don't want to hear about it. That's a constraint. So once again, returning to our dinner party scenario, my main constraint there would be that Steve is a very resistant audience. I've told him that, you need to listen to Taylor Swift. She's the best. Give her a second chance. And he is just adamant about the fact that he refuses to listen to her. He said, I've listened to one song. I never want to hear it again. She's horrible. A second constraint there could be that etiquette deems it impolite to play random music at a fancy dinner party. And we're at a fancy dinner party, so I can't just, whip out my phone and start playing Shake It Off. It's impolite. And lastly, maybe I just forgot my phone and I don't have the ability to show him the music, and maybe that's my strongest piece of rhetoric that's going to convince him of my idea. Okay, so now that we've established the basics, there are still a few more things that we need to consider. So you may be asking yourself now, does this mean that everything is considered a rhetorical situation? And the short answer to that is no, it doesn't. We've mentioned that in order to be a rhetorical situation, there needs to be exigence and an audience. Reconsider once again our dinner party scenario. We've already explored the most obvious way that could derail the rhetorical situation, and that would be Steve not being able to hear. But there's another route that the scenario could have gone. Perhaps Steve revealed his dislike for Taylor Swift and you said nothing. Instead, you head home early from the party and write a post on your blog about why Taylor Swift is the greatest musician of our generation. It is the best argument you've ever composed in your entire life, and it could change even the most resistant audience's mind. It could change Kanye West's mind. So, would that be a rhetorical situation? The answer, surprisingly, is still no. A rhetorical situation must attempt to mediate change in your target audience. In this case, it would be Steve. And that change must happen when the exigence arises. If Steve never reads your blog, and it's a very slim chance that he would, unless he's maybe subscribed to you secretly or some kind of divine intervention leads him to it. So, if he never reads your blog, then it's pointless. It doesn't matter if you persuade thousands of people because you never changed your target audience's mind. You never changed Steve's mind. Now, let's test out your understanding. Okay, so in Blackboard, you'll see that you've been divided into groups. In your groups, create a rhetorical situation that you might encounter in your daily lives and/or an issue that you are passionate about. If you could, please try to avoid any controversial topics. I'm not going to list any, but you know what I'm talking about. So once you've come up with your idea, I want you to list the exigences, the audiences, and the constraints on the worksheet posted on Blackboard. Next, you're going to take this information and create a script for a short animated video illustrating your rhetorical situation. To create this video, we will be using the free website Plotagon. Your video should be at minimum 1 minute and at maximum 5 minutes long. If you're having trouble using Plotagon, I've also included a link to a tutorial I made on Blackboard as well. This might seem a little daunting, but it should be fun. Make sure to have fun with it and let your creativity flow.